So the only way that things end up getting changed through the booking flow process is through actions being dispatched. And as a convenience, this is done by calling these action creators. Um, so, for instance, if we were to dispatch and call this action creator go to sign in light, this is a very simple action creator. When we call it, we end up just getting back this object, in which case our um, booking flow service looks at this and says, okay, all I need to do, there's nothing asynchronous going on here. Here's my new action, and I'm going to call my reducer with this action, and the state's going to be getting updated. Here's another simplistic one too. So, if we're just basically, changing our mode or doing something like that, there's nothing asynchronous going on. You'll see action creators that look like this, and there's a number of action creator files because there's a lot of stuff that's going on in this process, and all of them look similar. They all basically export what they want to expose, and they're really all aggregated in this booking flow action creators, which takes all of these and just merges them together. So, although you could send a type directly, it's kind of it's a little bit nicer to keep track of things, even with simple actions, like we saw here, to actually do it through these booking flow actions. So let's actually go back to where we were before and take a look at something a little bit more complicated. So let's see. Here's our checking availability. So that's something that's going to be complicated. If we end up looking at our action creator itself, we could see that when we call this action creator, we've got to give it some information. We're giving it here the day of our booking, the time of our booking, some notes that we have. We're passing in what market services we're interested in. We're giving an address, and we're giving our user info. So if we looked at where this was being called in our template, we would see that we would be using our action creators, check availability, and we would be calling this function. Now, what's different about this is that this function returns another function. And this tells the booking flow service that we're not ready to dispatch. There are things that we need to do asynchronously. And so what happens is that this function will end up getting called with the dispatch method. And there's a bunch of work that we're doing here. We're building up some objects. We're not really doing anything asynchronously yet. But then when we get down here, we're asking our helper service to do some work. We're making some asynchronous calls. We're seeing if we can, get an appointment. So there's a lot of work that's being done. We're doing some calculations if we're able to get an appointment. And eventually, what we'll end up doing here is that we'll end up using that dispatch object. So in this case, we're ready to go. We call dispatch. We've got all our data. Here's our search results. Here's our appointments. If there's a number of choices, here's our start time and our notes and our appointment itself, if we were able to find one. And then there's some catches here as well, in which case we are going to go to search results, but we'll have an error. So again, if you wanted to know what was happening in these, with these search results, again, you could go to the reducer and look and see how the reducer is basically taking this information and setting the new state. But in the end, what's important is that these action creators are really where the majority of the work is that's being done, or at least the asynchronous work, which is probably the most complicated part of the application. So just as another example that we could maybe set up here, if we go to sign in light, even going in and choosing an address. So if a user ends up choosing an address, again, there's some work we want to do. We've got the address, we've got a user info, we've got an address ID. And so, for instance, here, we've got to actually see if that address is within our boundaries. So again, this is why we are returning a function. Again, the booking flow service will realize this is a function. It'll after this action gets called, it'll get an object back. It'll see that that object is a function, in which case it'll call it and pass in the dispatch method. And again, it's up to us to decide when we're going to dispatch. So here we're able to find this. We've got an address that's chosen, and there's going to be we could have some error handling as well. And again, this is less error handling, but if in fact we were able to find a market, we'll specify that we have a found market. If not, we won't have a found market, and here we're actually we could end up dealing with that within our reducer. So again, really two type of reducer actions: either things that are synchronous, which just return a type, and things that aren't, which will end up returning a function.